Hey there, and welcome to What's the Story? We're an inquisitive bunch of hosts on a mission to uncover stories about faith and courage from everyday people. In doing that, we get the privilege of chatting with amazing guests and have the opportunity to delve into their faith journey, the hurdles they've overcome, and the life lessons they've learned along the way. If you enjoy our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com. It's your direct line to the latest episodes and detailed show notes delivered straight to your inbox. What's the Story is brought to you by Crowd Church, who fully understand that stepping into a traditional church might not be everyone's cup of joe. Crowd Church provides a digital sanctuary, a safe space to explore the Christian faith where you can engage in meaningful conversations rather than just simply spectating. So whether you're new to the Christian faith or in search of a new church family, visit crowd.church. And if you have any questions, just drop them an email to hello@crowd.church. They would love to connect with you. And now, let's meet your host and our special guest for today.
Okay, so welcome to another episode of What's the Story with me, Matt Edmundson. So opposite me is the beautiful man himself, Mr. Pete Farrington, who, if you're a regular Crowd, they will know you from all of the talks that Pete has done for Crowd. And so we thought, let's get him in the studio first time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Matt.
No, it's good. It's good.
Great to be here.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this. So we're going to record What's the Story, the podcast. What if you're listening, you know that already because there'll have been a nice little intro, which we've not heard. And so, welcome to What's the Story. We're going to dig into Pete's story about his Christian faith, challenges that he's faced, and some of the things that God's taught you along the way, which I'm looking forward to getting into.
Yeah,
so
it's going to be good.
Yeah. How long have we known each other now?
I don't really know. I mean, it's difficult to answer because I grew up in a church that we've both been part of for a long time. So, but it's been probably only like 4 or 5 years.
Maybe that we've known you a bit better.
Actually gotten to know each other a bit. Yeah,
I think that's because of your brother as well.
Yeah,
John.
True.
Who, if you're a regular to Crowd, you'll have seen John on here and his beautiful wife, Anna Grace. She also did a What's the Story before they went off to America.
Yeah.
Got her in the studio, which was really sad. I mean, it's great, but it was sad that they've gone. But they seem to be having a nice time.
Yeah.
From what I understand. Let's dig into it. So you've been a resident of Liverpool, but you've not been a resident of Liverpool your whole life.
No, not at all. People don't usually believe me when I say that I grew up in Liverpool because I don't sound like it.
Yeah.
So growing up, we did move around a little bit. So we lived in the Midlands for about 7 years, and then when we moved back to Liverpool, I didn't pick the accent. I didn't pick it up again. So it got beaten out of me in the Midlands.
Literally.
And then when I was 19, 20, I'm not quite sure, I moved abroad.
Such a long time ago now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know when it was. It was a while ago, yeah.
Yeah, I lived abroad for a number of years. So,
now you lived in Italy, right?
Yeah, in Florence.
Which is it just sounds amazing, just to go live in Italy. How long did you live there?
6 years, I think it was.
And you studied fine art, right?
Yeah. So I moved there to study painting, to study oil painting.
Yeah.
Which is what I'd always wanted to do, and heard about this small little academy that teaches just the traditional techniques of oil painting.
Yeah.
9 to 5 every day, and it was a dream come true. I mean, as cliche as that sounds, it was amazing.
No doubt.
The home of the Renaissance. It was such a beautiful city.
Do you miss it?
Yeah.
Would you ever go back?
I don't know. I think we love living in Liverpool, and so it would need something major for us to actually move back there. But it's it's got a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And you're fluent in Italian, right?
Fluent to push. I think.
You know enough to get by. You can order a pizza.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. I've tried over the years, off and on. When I don't know if you do the same as what I do, Pete, but off and on as I go through life over the years, I'll think, I'll just try and learn how to speak ...
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And, I'll try and pick up French again from school, or German or Spanish or Italian. And you kind of get so far. And then I'm just so confused about the whole thing.
Yeah. And it's just keeping it up. It's so hard.
I'm in awe of people that do that. But that's where you met Albiola, your wife.
Yeah. So we met the very first weekend that I was in Florence. She'd moved there 2 years before me to study dentistry. And we met in an international English-speaking church in Florence, and
so you've got this multicultural family now, right? Just which is just incredible. So how long have you been back in Liverpool then?
5 years,
right?
Yeah, just over 5 years. Yeah.
So you came back just like sort of pre-lockdown.
We'd been back for a couple. So it was like the autumn of 2018,
right?
So we'd been back for a couple of years before that.
Yeah.
And then
lockdown.
Yeah.
dun. And all the things that happened with you guys as well, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
So you grew up in a Christian family. Wow, it's what people would term a Christian family, isn't it? Your mum and dad go front line. Your dad was, the reason you were in the Midlands, your dad was part of a Christian radio.
He was a radio presenter for like the biggest Christian radio station
in the UK.
Yeah.
UCB. DJ Mike Farrington.
Yeah.
Playing the
DJ
tunes.
Mike.
Did he do that?
I hope not.
I just can't imagine Mike ever doing but no, it's, so you grew up in a Christian family, but then I'm guessing for you, like for most people that grew up in a Christian family, there came a point where you had to make some kind of decision yourself about the Christian faith, right?
Yeah. Because my earliest memories are like running around the church hall after the service, and like that. Grew up in that, so heard it all every week, every day for years and years. But I remember when I was probably like around 13, I remember standing in church holding the printouts of the song lyrics. I guess this was as we were transitioning away from acetates and the projectors.
I remember being the acetate guy in church. I remember, I'll do worship today, so I'll change that sheet of plastic for the next one. And you always
make sure you get it the right way.
Yeah, they got to get it the right way. You got to get it square.
Yeah.
Because you don't want people doing this. I don't think my kids knew what it was like back then. What do you mean you had to change a piece of plastic to get the lyrics on the screen? You had to do what?
Mad, isn't it? Can't remember what I was saying.
You're growing up running around the church.
Yeah. So I remember, reading the song lyrics during worship and just really thinking like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And is this just my parents' faith? I guess I was asking myself two questions. Like, one, do I believe this?
Yeah.
Do I believe that God is real? Do I believe this to be true? To which I think my answer was always yes. I don't think I ever, doubted the existence of God. But then the second question was like, okay, what's my engagement in that?
Yeah.
And do I want to have a personal faith, or is this just something I'm growing up in, and at some point I have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Either way.
So how old were you when you?
Roughly, sort of. Yeah, maybe even as early as 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got vivid memories of standing there, like hearing the songs, singing the lyrics, but thinking like, what's this all about?
Yeah.
To me, yeah.
Well, so if someone said to you, "When did you become a Christian?" How would you answer that question?
I don't know. No, I think I definitely did make a decision in my teens to follow God, and did really powerfully encounter God during my teens. But then there were many ups and downs throughout those years, and then a big down when I was 18, 19, shortly before moving abroad. So I can't really pinpoint like a day or a moment really. It's been, a long journey, to which I can't really say like, oh, that was the day when I became a Christian.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people like that, which is interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, you and I both sort of have this evangelical background where there's, for a lot of people, there's a very definite time and date where I made the decision at this point, right? I mean, it's easy for me, I suppose, in a lot of ways, because I didn't grow up in a Christian family. And so for me, there was a very definite point in time where I was like, but for my kids, I don't know if there is. I think it's not black and white. There's sort of this transitioning, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think it's when you grow up in a Christian family, it feels like there's a lot of micro decisions. Do you know what I mean? That you make. Yeah. And you can't sort of pinpoint and go, oh, that is the exact point in time.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It nothing related to anything, but I was interviewing a guy called his name's completely blanked out of my head now, but he's the head of Google data, right? Wow. I mean, a big guy, Neil Hoynes, that's his Neil, and I was interviewing him on a different podcast, and he's a head of Google data. I mean, he knows what he's talking about where data is concerned. And in the world of digital, right, we try and attribute everything. So if you go to a website and you buy, I don't know, a pen, right? And what the guy who owns the pen website wants to know is what was the reason for that sale, right? Okay. So it's called attribution. So if I can attribute that sale, like if you saw my ad on Facebook, came to my website and bought the pen, I'm going to go, that Facebook ad is working, right? So I'm going to throw a lot more money at that ad and get a lot more pens. And, evangelicals are like this when it comes to salvation. At what point can we attribute it? But Neil Hoynes was really interesting.
So is that made it work?
Yeah. Is that one? No, let's throw some money down at that. And Neil made this really interesting point, not about salvation, but about attribution. He said that, they were watching this one particular lady buy a pair of shoes on a website. It's not a sexist remark. This is just a genuine story, right? Yeah. And they're watching this one lady buy a pair of shoes. There were 236 points of contact for that one lady before buying that pair of shoes, right? Agree. So Facebook organic, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, the website, the blog, the YouTube channel, looking at 14 different other colors. Do you know what I mean? And so Neil asked this really interesting question. At what point did she decide to buy those shoes? How do we attribute that sale?
Right, yeah.
The answer is you can't, obviously. And so I think for people like yourself, like my kids, I don't know if there is that attribution, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's okay. There's lots of little things that happened along the way.
Yeah.
So what happened at 19 then?
19. So I started university. I guess I was 19. I'd taken a year out at some point along the way. And
you're just not great with the timeline.
No, I'm really not. I think it's Monday today. I don't know. But basically, I started university, and almost immediately, I completely lost my appetite. I had zero energy, had no. I was basically like just spent 20 hours a day in bed. I just had I didn't think I had any reason really to get up. And but for a few years prior to that, I'd been really struggling with self-harm for a couple of years, and kind of thought I'd gotten a handle on it. And I think I had a huge amount of, that was a very private struggle. No one knew about it. And I think there was a huge amount of I would call it self-loathing, really. I was growing up a very, very timid, very, very timid guy. And very, very low self-esteem. And I had a lot of questions. I guess I'm going back a little bit to the point where I became a Christian, that whole journey. But I had along that journey, I had questions about why things were as they were in my at home, and why I was like I was, and all that just came to a head at 19. So I was just in bed 20 hours a day. I think I went to uni about 3 times.
Wow.
I obviously didn't last long there. I dropped out like by the.
So this wasn't Florence.
No, sorry. Yeah, this was in England. Yeah,
right.
In Liverpool. Yeah, I was diagnosed with depression shortly after all of that, and but I was very, very depressive, and it was really, really dark time. I did entertain suicidal thoughts for a long. I remember a couple of months where I just, really entertain those thoughts. I don't think I was ever like close to, attempting anything, but it was on my mind all the time. I hated myself, really, really did. And I didn't. I was still in amongst all this. I was still going to church every Sunday, being the good Christian kid. That was important to me to maintain that that veneer.
So where did all that hatred come from?
I think that there were multiple things. I joked at the beginning about how the Scouse accent got beaten out of me in the Midlands, but I was bullied a lot at one point.
Right.
I think I thought there were, I thought I was just a really weird kid, and there were a lot of things about my life that made me different to, or I thought made me different to those around me. I was a Christian, or grown up in a Christian family, which is kind of weird at times. Yeah. I'd also been homeschooled for a long time, so there were lots of things that were kind of I thought were odd. Yeah. I hated that I was super skinny, and so it was kind of like a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking, when did the self-harm start?
So that was younger. I did get the time scale all out of whack, but when I was 16 or 17. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time?
I do. Yeah, I do. And it was actually after like a youth group meeting, like back at home. So I was like still going to church, doing all the midweek stuff. But I like I said, I don't think I ever stopped believing that God is real. But it really stopped getting down to my heart around that time, as in like, the fact that God might love me. Yeah. And the fact that he that I might not just be a nuisance to him. Yeah. But yeah, so it started around when I was like 16, 17. And I think it was to me the perfect expression of what I felt inside. So I think that's why I was drawn to that. Yeah.
Because I've heard lots of harrowing stories of self-harm. To be honest with you, not many men. I've not heard many men talk about it, but I've heard obviously women talk about it a lot. And I sit here listening to you talk, going, "Man, that's horrific." A 16-year-old kid feeling that is the way to express themselves at that point in time. Because I'm sitting here with my, my logical brain.
Yeah.
And my brain's going, "This does not compute. Why would Why would somebody want to do that? And I'm just curious, obviously I don't want to get graphic because you never know who's listening to the podcast in the car, but at the same time, I want to be real. How did you get into it?
I think that at the time, I was in college and I was studying art, and there were a lot of depressive people around me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I was aware of it as something that some people did.
Right.
And art, at least what I was studying at the time, was all about looking inside yourself.
Right.
And expressing whatever you find there. And what I found there wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
What I saw when I looked inside myself was something I hated. And so I guess I was drawn to it. Well, I was aware of it being a thing. I knew people who had struggled with it. I didn't know anyone who promoted it, but like I said before, it was kind of the only way that I could the only way I felt that I could truly express what I was feeling inside and kind of find an outlet for that self-loathing. And I said about like suicidal thoughts. I don't think it was ever something that I was close to acting upon, but the very sort of exploration in my mind of those things was just a continuation really of like not that I wanted to die, but that I really hated myself, and I didn't see a way out of that abyss really. So then it's like, well, it's only a matter of time before it comes out in some form.
Man, that's hard. So the phrase I hear counsellors use, and I definitely am not a counsellor, but the phrase I hear counsellors use is, are they actively suicidal? Okay. So when you have suicidal thoughts is one thing, but if people start to intervene when you're actively suicidal. So you're dealing with this then as a teenager.
Yeah.
That's a lot to deal with as a teenager.
Yeah.
Fast forward now, right? A few years down the line. Do you still struggle with depression?
No. It's but I would add that I know that it's something that I would have a tendency towards.
Right.
So, I'm not sure when was the last time I could say I struggled. I was struggling with depression then. But it's been a very long time. Yeah. I was actually talking about this with someone the other day because I love painting, and a number of years ago I wanted to create a painting that would sort of capture some of the feelings that I had inside me back when I was sort of 18, 19, so that I never forget what that felt like.
Right.
I want to be able to always empathize with people who are going through dark times, and I also never want to forget just how dark that was, so that I don't forget just how good God's been to me. So that's an aside, but
oh no, we're going to get into all of that. Because I'm curious how you went from that place to where you want. What happened? How did God help you with that? And I suppose I think if I'm listening to you talk, Pete, and I'm not a Christian, listening to you share your story, part of me is like, well, I'm curious to hear how God brought you out of it. What did God do? But another question that would be in my mind would be, well, why did God let that happen to you when you were a teenager? I don't know if you ever wrestled with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and not just that time, but, other times since, absolutely wrestled with those questions of why is this happening? And actually that was, part of my, the questions that I had for God at the time.
Yeah.
Like, why is this, why do I see so much pain in some of the lives, in so much pain in some of the lives of people that I love? So 100% that's definitely been something I've wrestled with, and but hindsight is amazing. But I actually haven't talked about the whole self-harm thing for quite a long time. But when I look back at that time and other times that have been difficult since then, although I wish that I didn't have to go through those seasons, it is at the same time difficult for me to say I wish that they never happened, because they are to me now so precious because of what I have since experienced of God's love as a result. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And it's one of those things, isn't it? It sounds a bit weird if you've never been in that situation. But sometimes your mum and dad used to say to me, well, my parents would say to me, you just don't know what you've got. Do you know what I mean? You don't know you're born. There's all that sort of phrase. And I think sometimes you don't know what it is you've got until you haven't got it. And you take for granted, I think, a lot of things. Breathing, until someone stands on your lungs and you can't breathe, in which case you're very much fighting for it. And I think when you've experienced these things, it totally makes sense how you would look at that and go, well, that has given me a revelation, which I am so very grateful for. I think I have the same outcome, a very different story in terms of how I got there, but the same outcome that actually, I became a Christian when I was sort of 18, 19. I can't remember the timeline either, to be fair, Pete, but but at the same time, I'm aware of life before Christ, and I'm aware of life after Christ. And I think whilst I wouldn't choose for my kids to go through what I went through,
of course,
going through them is part of the reason why I'm where I am today.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so I don't know if you can you regret them and not regret them at the same time? It's a really bizarre position, isn't it, to be in?
100%.
So you obviously have to deal with the depression. Do you deal with that then before you head off to Florence?
Yes. Yeah. So after I dropped out of uni, I was talking with a friend who'd recently been on something called a discipleship training school.
The DTS.
DTS.
The YWAM DTS.
And he'd come back a very different person, still the same guy, but he seemed lighter. And I remember just thinking, like, whatever has happened in your life, I need the same thing to happen to me. So on a bit of a whim, I decided to do this 9-month school in Germany. So I went there, and for the first sort of 3 months, there's lots of like Bible teaching and worship sessions and stuff. And basically in the first week, there was this teaching on the Father Heart of God for like a week. And there were like 100 people in this room every day. And people were just in bits the whole time, like floods of tears. Yeah. It was like, I remember turning to the guy next to me and saying something like, this is just a room of like very sick people, and I was one of them. Like, it was like open heart surgery for 3 months that time. And God just started like revealing to me all of the things that I'd sort of buried beneath the surface that needed dealing with. And I was just able to see and understand really for the first time something of what it meant that God is a father to me, and that he loved me, and I could start to see how he had been there throughout those difficult years, and really, really precious time. Wow. And I stopped it. Yeah, so I'd been taking antidepressants for a while at that point, and stopped, and haven't needed them since. So for me, I know this is not how it happens for everyone, but for me, it was just like, it was night and day.
Yeah.
There have been moments since where I've a couple of times been close to kind of slipping into that melancholic. There's something that I naturally would, with the Christian lingo term, my sort of sinful nature would, or the old man, the old self would have a tendency towards, definitely. Yeah. But it was a night and day. Heart. It was. Yeah.
Well, it's a great. I mean, surgery. It's a great story that God came down and met you in Germany, of all places. Let's go to Germany, Pete. That's where you need to go get yourself sorted out. But it's really. I love hearing stories of God's just transforming people. So like you say, sometimes that's super. Night and day in an instant. Or quite a quick time frame. Some people it takes years, but God still transforms. And you use this phrase, God revealed to me the Father heart of God and his love for me. But what does that mean? What actually happened there?
Like on that day?
Well, just, how did God reveal his love to you? How did he reveal his Father heart to you? I guess, again, I'm thinking people listening to the show might not know what that means.
Yeah.
Was it like a fortune cookie, or, it's that kind of, what happened to you? How did he reveal these things to you? And how did that get into your heart to the point where God just transforms everything?
I mean, I remember someone was praying for me, and they had, we'd call it a word of knowledge, where they felt God saying something to me, like that God had given them a message to give to me, and I sort of had everything together at that point, but as this person started speaking, it was like he actually repeated almost word for word things that have been spoken in like conflict and argument at home, and what had been a really painful time, and things were just, memories were coming to my mind of like, oh gosh, I'd almost like forgotten that specific event had happened, but now it's there, so vivid in my mind, and oh my goodness, I've never dealt with this. And just floods and floods of memories, and it's so hard to put something like this into words, because it's like I could feel viscerally all of the pain of the past, but at the same time, I felt a comfort, and comfort is just the word really, that that God was with me, and had been with me, and that there was a protection and a care, that a father would provide, that he was providing for me, and I don't know if that answers the question, but
it's just an interesting question, isn't it? And it's an even more interesting answer, really, because I think, again, everybody's story is different. How did God work in your life? How did you encounter God? How did you experience God? And everybody has different story. I mean, it just shows the greatness of God, really. That it's not sort of a one size fits all. But I was just curious. So you go to Germany. You encounter the love of God, you encounter the Father heart of God. Which, interestingly, I still think is perhaps one of the biggest revelations that we can experience, isn't it? It's the Father heart of God, that means, what that nature is. You come back like your friend changed? Are you lighter on your feet? Did you get what you wanted?
100%. And more. I felt like I I felt like I had purpose. I felt like that I knew God, that it wasn't, that it wasn't just knowing about him, because I knew a lot about him. I'd been told a lot about him, and but during that time, it was like I met him, and that that I actually learned what it was to live life with him, and to not be doing things alone, to not be alone, and so it really was totally transformative.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So then you go to Florence.
Yeah. So, and when I was in Germany, I met the director of this art school in Florence. So, so I basically decided straight away, like, I'm going to Florence. I'm going to go to this school, and and then that's how I met my wife. So the whole thing was like this, God orchestrated this roundabout way of getting to. Yeah.
All the little jigsaw puzzles and all the bits. You just sort of, you're like, God, how you put this together, I have no idea. But well done. All these little stories intertwining. Yeah. So you met your wife. You're there for 6 years. You learned some exceptional talents. I've seen your paintings; they're extraordinary.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
They're really great, unbelievable what you can do. I'm in awe. You come back with your bride back to the UK. How was that?
Yeah, it was strange because my wife was actually more keen to move here than I was. I think, when you've like been away for a long time, like 6 years, a lot had changed. Like most of the people who I was really close to, no longer lived in Liverpool, and you sort of have this idea in your mind that like, 6 years have passed, but nothing will have 6 years won't have passed in Liverpool. It'll still be the same. But so it definitely took some time to get used to being here again. By the time we'd gotten used to that, it was like straight into lockdown.
Thanks, lockdown.
But it's
that's when you came across. I mean, I know you've had various things throughout your life, but it's fair to say that's when you came across probably the most significant challenge in life, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's definitely the one that that comes to mind. So my our little boy Leo, who is he's just recently turned 3. He was born February 2021. Get the timeline right there.
I'll be able to.
So this was like deep into the longest lockdown.
Yeah.
Because it was that that second year, wasn't it? So I remember going to, we were going to the hospital, and, restrictions were really, really tight at that point. So, it was a difficult labor, and I was allowed to stay just for a little bit after the birth. But everything appeared to be fine. And, I went home after a few hours after the birth, absolutely elated. It's like, it is the most awesome thing to have witnessed. Is a strange word, I guess, but just truly awesome moment. So I went home absolutely elated, and thinking everything's fine. Alabiola's still so I haven't said that's my wife's name, Alabiola. She they kept her in overnight with Leo, and I went in the following day for like the short visiting slot that was allowed at the time. They wanted to keep her in a bit longer, so I went home. A few hours later, it's just like late afternoon, and then we hear they want to keep her in overnight. They were just something a little bit funny about his breathing. So Alabiola and Leo, they were going to stay in for a second night, and then it got into the evening, and got a phone call from Alabiola. I was actually with John and Anna Grace at the time, and Alabiola was panicking, and my heart just plummeted, and she didn't have a clue what was going on. They'd taken Leo. She didn't know what was happening, and it transpired that he had strep B meningitis.
Wow.
And I don't know how long he was away from Alabiola, but I was I then went straight over to the hospital, and they had to resuscitate Leo, and I mean, bless her, Alabiola was basically by herself for a lot of this time, watching his health deteriorate, and it was just absolutely terrifying, truly terrifying sight, seeing our little boy in the incubator, and so pale, and just horrible. I will never forget that. And they were very, very concerned. Consultants were they couldn't say if he was going to make it, and so for 2 or 3 days it was touch and go as to whether he was going to pull through. And it had been a dream of mine to be a dad. I just always dreamed of that. And so then to actually then be a dad, and for the whole thing to be on a knife edge. For this for this human being who you've had had a part in bringing into the world, to then very possibly lose him. It's just can't put it into words. But yeah, for 48 hours it was like, man, we could lose him. And so but those 48 hours felt like an eternity, and obviously I've already should have given a spoiler alert, but he's just turned 3, so he did
He's still around.
But those two, so he was in the NICU for 2.5 weeks. And obviously neither of us, particularly Alabiola, hadn't slept for a long time. But those 2 or 3 days in particular, immediately after birth, were harrowing. And and a real test of faith, and but I mean, we can go into it more, but I would say as well, I alluded to it before, this is one of the other times that I would say were really dark. I wish that didn't have to have happened to my son, to Alabiola, to me. But I look back on it now as some of the sweetest moments of my life, because of how I experienced the love of God throughout it.
So it's again that tension, isn't it? That crazy tension. So you're in this I remember during the first lockdown, my brother was in hospital because he had a stroke.
Oh wow.
And I couldn't get in to see him. He's a couple of years younger than me, and I couldn't get in to see him because they wouldn't let anybody in. I couldn't even get in on the Reverend card. I don't know if you know about the Reverend card, but you get into hospital, you're a church minister. No, I don't care. God's not coming in. You're like, oh, okay. And I remember thinking, man, this was my brother. Love my brother. I think is a legend. Really. But at the same time, it's going to be a lot worse if that's my wife and son.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I can't. I'm trying to think what that would have felt like for you, but I can't empathize. I can think about my brother and not being able to get and see him, but at the same time, I'm like, my wife and son, I didn't have that, you know. I mean, I can talk about what Sharon went through with Josh, but it was nothing compared to this. And so I'm kind of like, what was that like?
Horrible. Yeah. And I had to fight. to be able to get in, in the first place when I heard that news. So initially it was like a lot of coming and going for the first, I don't know, like 4 or 5 days. I think I would have to leave at night. I was like so sleep deprived, so just could. And then my wife and my son, who I've spent, a handful of hours with, are both there. I don't know if he's going to make it.
Yeah.
It was brutal. And and just felt utterly helpless in a way that I've just never had that feeling before like there is literally nothing that I can do.
No.
I can't even just be there all the time. Horrible.
Yeah, no doubt. And for Albiella as well, I would have thought. Wrestling with this in hospital. Yeah. Jeez. So, what was faith like at this point?
So, because 2020 was obviously a weird year, to put it lightly, for everyone. It was mental, but for a lot of people, our lives had really shrunk. So, a lot of stuff had been stripped away, and thinking about faith and church, like you didn't have the buzz of community of like being around people all the time. So that was gone. You didn't have communal times of worship. That was gone. And so it really like caused both of us to really think hard about what our faith is actually built on. And if you take away the good vibes on a Sunday morning and the nice music and everything, what's left? Yeah. And I remember reading a book. What was it called? The Cross-Centered Life, I think. Which just unpacks the gospel. It's not a big book, but just absolutely ruined me for the gospel again. And in a way, so like when you ask the question, when did you become a Christian? Part of me is tempted to say 2020.
Right.
Because up until that point, the cross, the death and resurrection of Christ had been something that, we sort of pay homage to every Easter.
Yeah.
You might watch the Mel Gibson film, Passion of Christ, and have a sort of, somber Good Friday service, and, so like wink at it once a year, but really, like in terms of how I live my life, I would sort of see it kind of like as a course you graduate from. Like, I took that class in the 90s.
Yeah,
the gospel.
Yeah.
But I was just absolutely wrecked by it. By just I just read a lot and really thought over and considered like a big, like really important passage was Romans 5. Like God demonstrates his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Just those words alone, to think it wasn't when I was lovable. It wasn't when I was God's child.
Yeah.
That's why the fact that he adopted me means something.
Yeah.
It was that the innocent died for the guilty. And it wasn't just that like it wasn't just that someone died for another in the place of another, took the punishment of another. It was that the victim, God's the victim. that he died for the perpetrator. And I think really just think like I was, I guess God just revealed to me again the depths of my sin, and in doing so revealed to me how much higher the heights are of his grace and his mercy. So then going forward to being in the hospital, it was like, I know Alabiola would say the same, has said the same as well, that it was like we had a deep well to draw from. My prayers in the hospital were like, really only went as far as the word Father. It was just Father. Like I had no other words. I was so sleep deprived. My vocabulary was probably like a dozen words anyway. But it, I was so utterly helpless and so afraid that we might lose Leo. But I knew in those 48 hours when everything was on the line, when his life was on the line, I knew in the deepest part of my soul that I didn't need God to save Leo in order to know that he loves me.
Right.
Like my being convinced of his love for me was not contingent on the outcome of this situation. Because God demonstrates this present tense, God demonstrates his love for me in that while I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. And, like when Jesus is prophesied about in Isaiah and he's called Emmanuel, God with us, the with being in between God and us shouldn't be possible. That God would be with us. If everything was fair and we just got what we deserved, that wouldn't be it. And God is the gospel. For him to have given himself to us is there's he's not a means to the end. He is the end. And to have him, so to be there in the midst of all that, to know that God was with me was everything. And so that's why I say it was just like some of the sweetest moments of my life, because everything was on the line and I didn't know at the time what was going to happen. But I knew that I had everything because I had God. Thankfully the story ended happily. But it really was like coming to a deeper understanding of the gospel that I think I would genuinely terrified to imagine what that would have been like without that well to draw from. A life without God really truly, I think, a terrifying thought. To know that God is with us changes everything. Absolutely everything.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? And I mean, thank you for sharing, because these things aren't always easy to talk about, I don't think. They're not always nice things to remember. But like you say, at the same time, you find God in them, don't you? And you see God and you experience God in ways that are rarely taught in evangelical churches. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of, and in some respects, fair. Why would you talk about it I suppose from a church service? But I suppose I could argue it either way. But it's a remarkable story, Pete. And as someone who watched from afar, like all you could do during lockdown was you got text updates and you're like, well, okay, we'll keep praying then, I guess. I don't know what else to do. Like prayer's not enough sometimes we're just like, I'm really sorry, all I can do is pray. You're like, you what? That's great. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like we undermine prayer sometimes, don't we? By apologizing. That's all I can do.
100%.
But I think, someone who's watched you guys from afar and just, even today we were in the drive on the way down to the studio, you were talking about how Leo is now able to drink a glass of milk. And you
Yeah.
It's God, these things that people have been praying for. And one of the things that I don't say it to many people, Pete, but there are some people that truly inspire me, right? Like you guys, you and Albiola with Leo, just unbelievable. And the people that inspire me are the people that have gone through something so horrific, but come out just the sweetest, just loveliest people, not bitter, not angry, just love God, have a revelation of the gospel in that, and just come out of it with a desire to share Christ with the world. Do you know what I mean? It's the most extraordinary thing. There's some friends in London like that, some friends in the States. And actually, I find it utterly inspiring. The people that I've met a lot of wealthy people over the years, and they're great to hang around. Don't get me wrong. I've mentioned before in Crowd Church that I've flown on their private jets. I've had their chefs cook me meals and all kinds of crazy things. And I would be irresponsible to say that I didn't enjoy that. But do I find those people inspiring? No, not really. I just find they're nice people to hang around with, and they're wealthy people, got a lot of money. Some parts of their life are inspiring. But it's the people that have been on the coalface and been refined by fire, for want of a better expression. Not that I would form a theology on that, by the way, just in case you're listening. But it's just a phrase. But no, I think you guys are utterly inspiring, and I just love the way God was there. And God met you guys, and I think, oh, good on you, man. And a big shout out to Albiola that kept you on the straight and narrow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like as hard as it was for me, doubly hard, I think, to have. In very different ways. To have, I mean, because, I felt helpless, but she was, there all by herself watching it all happen. Yeah.
I remember reading a quote by Smith Wigglesworth once, which said, "Everything I am in my life under God, I owe to my sweet wife, Polly." And I remember reading that going, I've been married 26 years and I totally get that statement. Do you know what I mean? Because and I'm sure you'd say the same thing. My wife is utterly remarkable. And I think actually you journey through this knowing that God is enough. But there is something about journeying through this together with a wife who has a strong faith as well.
Yeah. 100%.
Because you can support each other then, can't you? And so, amazing. If you could go back in time, have a conversation with your 16-year-old self.
Yeah.
What would you say?
That is a good question. I think, I was believing a lot of rubbish, and I think I would preach to myself. I think that's something that's that we need, I think that's something that's we need to learn to do to ourselves. I think I would tell myself that, I don't know if it would have done anything, but I think I would have told myself that God is with you. And even though you may not see any evidence of it, that doesn't mean it isn't true. And things will look very different from a different perspective. Also talk to someone.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Which I did do, but after far too long. So.
Yeah, I'm just aware that there's people listening, I'm always in. I love it when people come on, totally vulnerable, share their story, you know, and then I'm thinking of the listener going, there's going to be, knowing God the way I know God, there will be someone listening to you talk who is feeling what you felt, who is maybe doing what you did.
Yeah.
Either when you were a teenager or they're feeling what you felt because their wife is in hospital and their child is sick. And they'll be listening to your story, and there'll be prayers, and there'll be heartfelt, you know, there's going to be emotion and all kinds of things. And I think it's probably fair to say, if that is you, if you are listening and you are engaged with self-harm, then do seek out counsel. Do talk to people, do go. And if you don't know who to talk to, reach out to us here at Crowd Church. I'm not a trained counsellor, but we will definitely tell you where to go. Go see your GP as a good starting point, isn't it? But do seek help.
Yeah.
But at this, also remember, God is with you. Would you say that's true even if someone's listening to the show and they don't have a Christian faith? Just happened to have stumbled across your story. God is, we'd say, omnipresent. He's everywhere, and you can cry out to him at any moment. You know, he's and because of Jesus, we have total access to him. So he's made that way possible. So you don't need a certain score on your perfect meter, do you? Your perfectometer.
I had 0.
You don't need any kind of reputation or any kind of, you know, CV or resume, as they'd say in America. But you just go to God, pour out your heart, and just keep doing it. And at some point, something will break. I love the story of one of my favorite stories in the Bible is a woman with the issue of blood and Jairus' daughter. So it's found in Mark chapter 5, and the woman has this bleeding issue for 12 years. 12 years. I mean, and the way the Bible talks about it is she spent all that she had, but not got any better. She'd got worse. I mean, life was just going from bad to worse for this lady. And this was a serious condition back then. But after 12 years of prayers, 12 years of longing, you know, 12 years of trying what she could do to make things better, in an instant, everything changed for her. The word the Bible uses, suddenly. And you're just like, I just love where the Bible uses the word suddenly. Suddenly, and then Jairus' daughter's sick. She's not sick for 12 years, but we don't know how long she was sick for, but she was sick. She dies. And then suddenly everything changes to him. And that's Jesus, isn't it? Sometimes it might take 12 years. Sometimes it might just take a few days. Like, but Jesus he's all about the transformation. He's all about the suddenly. And I think the hope that's in that is extraordinary. Do you know what I mean? That no matter what you're in, he can turn it around. So.
I think the other thing that just popped into my head was, I can't remember what the name is in Hebrew, but one of the names for God in the Bible is the God who sees. And I just think that is beautiful that God is...
Oh, is it El Roy?
Is that it?
Yeah, ROI, I think it is.
Okay.
Anna Kettle, who's another regular on Crowd, has just had it tattooed on her wrist. Yeah, the God who sees.
Yeah.
I mean, what a story she's got. If you've not heard Anna's What's the Story, definitely check that out, you know, with the miscarriages that those guys have had. Heartbreaking stuff. But yeah, she's got that tattooed on the God who sees. Elroy. ELROI, I think it is. Not Elroy.
But yeah, you know that he's not aloof. He sees you, wherever you are, and that he's watching and he's ready. Yeah, he's waiting, and he's willing to transform. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Pete, listen, man, I'm aware of time, but it's a great conversation. So thank you so much for coming in. I loved it. Loved hearing your story. Loved catching up. I'm going to enjoy the car trip on the way home.
Yeah.
Just chat about
just more of this.
Yeah, just more of this. But no, I really appreciate it. And If you want to connect with Pete, you can reach out to him through the Crowd Church. We'll obviously pass on all messages to him, but I'm not going to put his email out in the public domain because that would just not work. But thank you so much for coming on, man. You're an absolute legend.
Thanks for having me.
When are you next at Crowd?
It's for 4 or 5 weeks. Okay. I'm recording it in like 3 weeks. So
okay.
5. Yeah.
Okay. Very. What's the topic? You probably shouldn't say because it's going to date this. No, it's fine. What's the topic?
It is fruit of the Spirit, kindness, I think.
I don't think it is because I'm just prepping that talk. Right?
Oh, maybe it's not that.
Maybe you're doing kindness, but both prepping.
All right. Well,
we're going to go and consult the teaching rotor right now, ladies and gentlemen. Whether way, I mean, you'd be much better at it than me. But no, legend. Thanks, Pete. You're a star.
Thank you.
And just like that, we've reached the end of another fascinating conversation. Crowd Church is a digital church, a community, a space to explore the Christian faith, and a place where you can contribute and grow. To find out more, check out www.crowd.church. And don't forget to subscribe to What's the Story on your favorite podcast app. We've got a whole lot of inspiring stories coming your way, and we really don't want you to miss any of them. What's the Story is the production of Crowd Church. Our fantastic team is made up of Anna Kettle, Matt Edmundson, Tanya Hutzalak, and myself, Sutha Fainin. We work behind the scenes to bring these stories to life. Our theme song is the creative work of Josh Edmundson. If you're interested in the transcript or show notes, head over to our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com, and sign up for our weekly newsletters to get all this goodness delivered straight to your inbox. So that's all from us this week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.